Hi.
I don't know if I've ever been in an epic Zoom with this many people. It's exciting. A little intimidating, but that's okay. Nice to see everybody. We'll give it just a minute. Give some folks some time to join. I think we have some students on as well, so that's fabulous. The entire Dvorin family, pretty cool. Ken, you're in your purple. I feel like I should have dressed for the occasion.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to send the memo. I wrote it, forgot to send it. Matt didn't get it either. Matt? No.
I'm not seeing it.
All right.
Hi, Danielle.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm looking through everyone. I'm trying to see if I see any faces, but
I
I'm
see
seeing
Eva. See Michelle. Brandy, hi. Jeff, how's it going? There are like 4 pages of people. This is a this is a new one for me.
I think Jim White is on the call too now.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, there's Sophie. Hi, Sophie. Oh, she just, oh, there she is.
Nice to see student faces, for sure. We've been missing you guys. One more minute. We'll allow folks to be 5 minutes late, that's all. But I'm not going to start over. Hi, Julie. All right, it's 6:05 on the dot, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And the purpose of this meeting is to go over our current plans for reopening schools starting, I can't believe it, August 11th. This is happening. And I don't think I need to set the scene too much. We all know that the challenge here is that we are in the midst of a pandemic. And we are in a situation where cases in our community are on the rise at this point. So we need to talk about a way that we can get students engaged in school and everybody back to the business of teaching and learning, and to do that in a way that's safe. So the way that we'll kind of run this meeting, if you'll notice everybody's on mute and you can't really unmute yourselves. So along the way, if you have clarifying questions about anything that I'm going to go over, could you please put your questions or comments in the chat? And then Ken Hardy, our illustrious associate principal, is going to sort of moderate. So Ken's just gonna stop me if we need to answer a question. And then finally, at the end, you will get the chance for a little bit of a Q&A. So if you have kind of those bigger questions that need a little bit of discussion, do know that at the end of this meeting, we'll have a little bit of time to answer those questions. And finally, if you don't get your questions answered tonight, and please just know, we won't be able to answer them all. There are some that we just don't have answers for yet, but we'll do our best. And just know you can always email me or call, and I will do my best to answer your questions after the meeting, okay? So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. We'll see, nope, that was the wrong thing. Give me 1 second. Okay, can everybody see this lovely presentation? Ken, give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, and you know, I just got it. There's a note in the chat here from one of the parents that the meeting's only allowing 100 participants. Do you know if you can reset that?
Okay. That would be a fun new surprise if, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can reset.
Someone suggests that if it's the free version, that's the limit, if you're using the free version.
I don't believe I am. Whoops. Are there any tech folks who know what the issue is? If you could put something in the chat or raise your hand, and Ken will unmute you. Not using the free version.
Are you recording it, Becky?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we can do, I'm going to record this meeting. I'm going to include all the information and the recording in my newsletter tomorrow. So that may be the best that we can do.
And did you give me the ability to mute and unmute?
I will at the end of the meeting.
Sounds good.
When we have
Okay.
the Q&A, if that's all right. Okay. I'm going to give this another shot and see if I can, let's see. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Okay, now can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we got it.
Great. So what we're going to talk about today, we are going to talk a little bit about the context and sort of how we got here. We're going to review Inspire's safety plan for reopening. We're going to talk about student support for learning, especially for students who receive special education services. We're going to talk about mental health and wellness supports for students. And we're going to review this 1x8 block schedule. This is the model that we are adopting for this year, unless things change. So the context, as I said, we know that we are in the midst of a pandemic, and that cases are on the rise in our community in this moment. Along the way, I have been meeting several times a week with county leaders, district and charter leaders, and we've been discussing, reading resources, and trying to keep as up to date as possible on federal, state, and county guidance. We are not public health experts, and so we have been in close contact with the public health experts, Butte County Public Health, for some guidance and some recommendations on what a safe return to school might look like. But please know that those pieces are simply guidance and recommendations. We don't have a federal response. We don't have a state response in terms of reopening schools. And so all of the decisions about reopening schools have been swept downhill to school leaders. And finally, they have been swept downhill to you as parents to talk and to do your research and to decide how you want to send your child back to school. So it's important that we know that at Inspire, we've been working diligently. We've pulled in parents, students, staff, board members, community members to put together a plan that it is as safe, as reasonable, as data-based as possible. It's also important to really acknowledge and think about the fact that some deep divides exist here. This is an issue that has been politicized, and there are sort of deep divisions and strong feelings on many different sides. So that has made it difficult for schools to know how to best serve students and how to best serve families. As a school, Inspire has always been a place where we have had a pretty strong shared vision, and we have been able to overcome deep divides, and we've been able to partner well with our staff and with our community. And I think that we all can agree that our shared desire and our shared vision is a return to school where students are deeply learning, deeply engaged, well served, and safe. So it's important that we continue to partner together and that we give each other space and understanding, that we're able to hold an understanding of what other people are feeling as we talk about these decisions. And it's also important to note that the situation is very, very fluid. Right now, Butte County is in phase 2 of the reopening plan statewide, and Governor Newsom has put some counties on a watch list because of the rise in their cases. Right now, Butte County is not on the watch list, but we have had a rise in cases, and we may be placed on that list at any time. If and when that happens, we will need to rapidly shift, and we will need to rapidly reconsider our plan. So I hope everyone understands that the plan, as we're laying it out to you tonight, is what's happening today. Tomorrow, Governor Newsom has a press release planned that we are pretty certain will include guidance for K through 12 schools. So I need everyone to keep in mind as we go through this that we need to be able to be flexible and to change our plans at any time. Our priorities as a school, first of all, and in putting together these reopening plans, to provide a safe learning environment for your students, to make sure that they are physically safe and sound when they're at school. And second, to support student social and emotional well-being at school. And we also want to continue to do the thing that makes Inspire inspire, and that is to offer a wide range of high quality coursework with master teachers that allows students to really explore and discover what they love and what they are good at. And we feel confident we can do that last piece, the two priorities, the safe learning environment and social and emotional well-being. This is at the heart of why developing these plans is so difficult for schools, because on the one hand, if we wanted no risk of spread, we would go back to distance learning. However, with that experiment last semester, we know that it is vital for students to be able to be engaged with each other in person and with their teachers in order to have that social and emotional well-being served. We also know that having students off campus, there was a rise in instances of depression, of anxiety, of suicide. We know that many fewer students applied for college during that time. So as we're weighing these priorities, it's once we tug on one thing, it affects the other. So, and I think that's also why there's so many strong feelings here. As parents, you are having to make decisions about your child's physical safety and also emotional safety. And that's an incredibly, incredibly difficult decision to make. So we just want to hold and acknowledge and honor that there is a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty around this idea of going back to school. So we acknowledge that and we completely understand. Should I stop a moment, Ken, before we move on? Are there any questions that need to be answered at this point? Oh.
Yeah, can you hear me, Becky?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to get to one question. Will we hear about the plan if we are put on a watch list, since that is all but assured to happen?
So the plan would be that we would go back to distance learning and that teachers would deliver distance learning as they similarly to last semester. However, we've had lots of planning and lots of discussion as a staff about an improved version of that. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm not going to go over that plan at this point. I'm happy to share it with you, but that's what would happen likely if we were to go on a watch list.
And that's all for now. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit first about our safety plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Ken to give you just kind of an overview.
Here's another question that just popped up. Let me see if I can get this. If we were to go back to distance learning, will we go back to the 1x8 plan once taken off the list?
Yes. Yeah. So, let's wait and look at the 1x8 plan, and then I'll kind of talk about how that would allow us to toggle back and forth between distance learning and in-person learning.
Yep. And then there's a question about teachers, and we have teachers on the panel tonight, so they can answer that teacher question.
Great.
So here are our some of the many safety measures we put in place. So when your student arrives to campus, we're going to take the temperature. The teacher will take the temperature of your student at the door with a forehead thermometer, And if the temperature reads under 100.4, then the student's good to go. But if we have a reading over 100.4, we're going to send the student to the office to get one more temperature check with our nurse in the office. And we have a little bit more sophisticated thermometer in the office. And if we can confirm that the temperature is above 100.4, we're going to ask that the student go home. Students and staff are experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, we're going to ask that you stay home. We will provide face coverings for all staff and students, and masks and face coverings will be required of all staff and all students. We've installed, we've basically transitioned our bathrooms to touchless, almost all touchless bathroom fixtures. So we've got sinks now that will go on automatically without having to touch the faucet. We used to have the hand blow dryers, which aren't as safe as just regular paper towels. So we have paper towel dispensers now in the bathrooms. Outside of the doors of the bathroom have foot like pedals where the student doesn't have to use the door handle to get into the restroom. You just use your foot to pull the door open. We have lots of social distancing measures, not just on campus, but also inside the classroom. So we're going to ask that teachers keep students seated 6 feet apart. And yes, I see the question, can students bring their own masks? And yes, they may bring their own masks. 6 feet apart in the classroom. We're going to ask that all students face the same direction inside the classroom. We're going to ask that teachers establish one-way traffic inside their classrooms. And we're going to also set up and enforce one-way movement on campus. So when your student arrives on campus, you'll see one-way arrows on the ground and on the sides of the buildings. So we can just keep kids going in one direction and cut down on some of that sort of cross traffic, which may lead to some passing of infection if it's there. We've got hand sanitizers installed in each of the classrooms. In addition to that, we're going to position 4 hand washing stations throughout the campus. We think we're just going to put them at each of the corners of the campus, so students feel more comfortable and more safe with the hand washing and soap. We have that opportunity for them. Our high touch areas in the classroom, such as the chairs, the seat backs of the chairs, the tabletops, those will be cleaned frequently. The staplers, the pencil sharpeners, all those things will be cleaned regularly, frequently, and daily. And then all classrooms, of course, will get at the end of the day a regular cleaning and disinfection. Okay, and then there's a question: what happens when an outbreak occurs and attending in person becomes impossible? What happens? And Becky's going to get to that. So
yeah. So part of should I share now, Ken?
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of the rationale for this model is that it really minimizes contact. And that it allows for, even in a secondary school, smaller cohorts that stay together for an extended period of time. So in the event that someone does contract COVID, that would limit the number of contacts. The way that contact tracing works, it's possible that maybe just that cohort would have to quarantine, but it may not result in a school-wide shutdown. So that's really our rationale. I have been part of the Butte County Office of Education's reopening plan, and there has been a collaboration between nurses and BCOE staff, school nurses, excuse me, and Butte County Public Health nurses to put together sort of a flow chart that tells schools exactly what to do if a child is exhibiting symptoms, or a staff member exhibiting symptoms of COVID, or if someone tests positive. So they're nearly finished with those flowcharts and documents, and I will share those with you as soon as I possibly can, so you know exactly the way that our staff is going to sort of launch into action mode. So hope that helps.
Becky, there's a question about, can you please cite the data for suicide rate increase, anxiety increase, and college enrollment numbers?
No. But I don't have that in my mind right now, but I'm happy to share that with you. Just email me, give a call.
And then what happens when an outbreak occurs and attending in person becomes impossible? And what happens when the teachers and subs get sick?
Yeah. And we have a plan in place to have kind of a cushion of coverage for subs. And so we're hoping that will help mitigate the issue, but there's going to be a community-wide kind of sub crisis. So what would happen if our teachers couldn't be at school, that might trigger a return to distance learning as well.
And there's a question about the start time. So given that Chico Unified District decided to do an AM/PM model that still has half their students arriving at 8:30, will this affect our start and end time so that we can minimize contacts with all the Chico High kids?
We'll talk about that when we get to the model. Can you remind me, Ken, when we get to the piece? Okay. Anything else about safety?
Let's see, their model does not decrease contacts as much as ours does. And of course we share the campus. Okay. And I can speak to that just a little bit. I've reached out to the Chico High administration to put together a plan for just addressing that. So we may end up not sharing the gate. We may end up having different gates to go in and out of campus, but we know that is a concern and we will address it.
Yeah, and we're also working on plans for students to grab their lunch so they aren't going to have to go on the Chico High campus to do that. So we're working on those pieces. Moving on.
Okay.
So just to address the mask issue, because we know this has been a point of contention and a difficult decision for schools, we have changed our language on that and decided to require face covering for all staff and students. We will be providing training and information on proper use, removal, and washing of face coverings. Inspire will provide face covering for staff and students, but of course you can absolutely send your child to school with, if you have another mask that they like to use, definitely you can do that. We would ask that you would let us know as soon as possible if your child needs some sort of accommodations for this requirement, and we can work with you to figure out how to accommodate that. Our decision is based on the research is becoming clearer and clearer, and this CDC, the message is clear that the use of masks is the most powerful tool for preventing the spread of COVID, and that use needs to be pretty universal. So that's what we're doing. We're coming down hard on the side of this to ensure that we have our best chance of being able to remain on campus. So that's kind of the rationale. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt, if I can find him, to talk a little bit about special education support. Matt, are you there?
I am.
All right.
Hello, everybody. Matt McLaughlin, Director of Special Ed and School Psychologist. I'm going to talk for a couple minutes about the special education supports that we provide, and also a little bit about the mental health support we're going to provide. As we're developing the 1x8 model, we're also figuring out how we're going to provide services in that context. And so the best way we have concluded to provide special ed support if we are doing on-campus learning through 1x8 model is through push-in support. So we have staff that we're going to push into classes, specifically the core classes that are academically rigorous that we tend to have kids grouped into, and then provide the special education supports and accommodations in the regular classroom for those classes. typically kids would be in academic support classes, which is an elective class for them. We will not be able to offer those classes because kids will be in gen ed classes. Not all kids will be around in the afternoon. We're trying to make it so we're able to not do as much, cross-pollination. Trying to keep kids in cohorts as much as possible. So we're going to have our staff pushing into classes in addition to, in the afternoon, with the teacher that's pushing into their area, to their classroom, to also get additional support for students that are here for the whole day during the class they're taking in the 1x8 schedule. So they will have both push-in support, and also kids can get small group and it says one-on-one, but it's also a small group instruction with a staff member. And then we will also have virtual support. Virtual support can be for any kid in any of the options. Some of the folks that were not around for this have a new 9th grader in special education. We had everything from students that were able to function well in the distance learning with just weekly check-ins. We had kids that we were having sessions with every day. We had everything in between. We have to remember that in an IEP, the I is individualized. And so we will be talking and reaching out to all the families about what is needed for your particular child and what sort of supports are required based on the option that you choose.
Talk about mental health.
Yep. Okay, so mental health support. I think we talk a lot about how all this uncertainty, all the lack of our normal routines of our normal lives and what it does to us emotionally and also physically. We will continue to support via counseling, myself and the rest of the counseling team, both virtual and in-person support. So kids can have appointments virtually if it's appropriate and safe. We can also have in-person counseling support. That will still be provided. We're also going to be continuing to focus on trauma-informed training for staff development. We have a staff development days in August that we're going to be focusing on both a knowledge base and also being able to kind of reach our greater community through our staff members that interact with everybody on campus. So we're continuing that training with staff. And then the increased outreach. One thing we did after the closure is that we had a team of people that were calling a great deal of families fairly regularly. And I think we had some pretty good feedback on that. So we're going to develop that parent outreach part of having staff that are keeping the school, especially when a kid is just on distance learning, to be able to check in with those families on needs, both social, emotional, and academic, special education, and new order of accommodations, and just making sure that we don't have people kind of on an island doing their educational experience. We want to still have you connected to the school.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions that maybe Matt could answer, Ken?
No, not right now.
Okay.
People are anxious to hear about the 1x8 plan, though.
Okay, perfect. All right, moving on. Okay, so here is our radical plan, the 1x8 block schedule. The kind of flyover summary: students take one class at a time, plus virtual advisory classes at a time. Each class covers a year's worth of coursework in 4.2 weeks. So think of it as sort of an intensive, almost a summer camp where you're diving deep into that material. At the end of the year, students will still have earned credits for 8 classes, so they will still have that broad range of classes that they can take. And the rationale for this is that it minimizes contacts between students and teachers, but it still allows for students to be on campus and to receive that daily in-person instruction that we know is so necessary for accountability and engagement, mental health, social and emotional well-being, and all of that. So before we look at what that model sort of looks like. I think it'll be important for us to define some terms because it's been a little confusing to think about, let's see, what is distance learning versus independent study, et cetera. So when we talk about direct instruction, this is the teacher in the classroom who's directing the learning. So it happens on campus and in person. It's actually a little bit broader definition of that, but that's what we're using for our kind of understanding today. Distance learning, this is what happened last semester. This is the math teacher who is teaching her own curriculum, but the students in a separate place. So some of that curriculum might be delivered online, it might be in the textbook, it's happening at a distance. At this point, Inspire would deliver distance learning only if the state or county recommends campus closure. Independent study is different than distance learning. Independent study happens with a packaged curriculum. We're currently looking at Edgenuity as our independent study curriculum. A student enrolled in independent study is working at home independently and is supervised by a dedicated independent study teacher. And this is going to happen if parents choose to keep students learning at home. You would be able to have the choice of enrolling your child in independent study through Inspire. Extended learning, think of it as homework. So it happens in addition to direct instruction. This is the student doing some work and some assignments independently, but it's an extension of that direct instruction happening in the classroom. So I hope that clarifies things just a little bit. So let's look at what a school calendar would look like. We plan to have our first 2 days of school where students are meeting in that first period class. And excuse me, I had advisory on there, but ignore that. They'll be meeting in their first period class. The first 3 hours of the day, they're doing some tutorials. How do you log into Schoology? They're going to be learning some safety procedures, education on masks, etc. They're going to be doing some community building. And especially for those incoming students, getting to know what our community as Inspire is like. So it's really just folding those students in, making sure that they're prepared and ready to go to be successful in their classes. And then period 1, you can see it just goes right down the line, and each period is about 4.2 weeks. Here's an example of a grade 10 schedule. So again, you get to take a range of classes, including core classes and elective core classes, and do all the great things that you would usually do at Inspire, but it's one class at a time. Before we look at the daily schedule, Ken, do we have any clarifying questions about the 1x8 blocks so far?
Well, there's a question about for seniors who need just a few credits to graduate, will they still have study hall option to be concurrently enrolled in college, or just graduate early by completing courses?
Possibly. I mean, it's possible that this could be a great opportunity for seniors to knock out what they need to knock out. We also, for seniors, counselors can let you know opportunities for concurrent enrollment. So absolutely.
Okay, there's a few more, but I think we should get to the 1x8 block.
Okay. The instructional models, and this is the important part for you to talk with and think about with your family, because you have a choice of several models for sending your child back to school. So you could choose the full-time model. So in this model, students attend school in person from 8:30 to 3 on Mondays through Thursdays, and 8:30 to noon on Fridays. And we'll talk about what that would look like in just a minute. In the hybrid model, students would attend school in person from 8:30 to noon, Mondays through Fridays. Then they would head home and they would do some extended learning at home. So they're getting both that direct instruction in the classroom and they're doing some independent work at home. And then finally, the independent study model. If you do not feel comfortable sending your child back to school, your student can be enrolled in independent study via Edgenuity and still be an Inspire student, still engage with their advisory, still dig into the resources on Schoology, but would be able to complete their coursework at home. I want to stop there for just a minute, see if there are any quick clarifying questions.
Question about AP tests or AP classes. Will they be given the test after the 4.2 weeks? And the answer is no, but the test will be scheduled in May. And we're going to try to have the AP courses offer them as close to May as possible as the schedule will permit.
Right. And then there are some classes for which this model is not ideal. And so we're going to need those teachers will creatively plan to do some kind of review, to do some sort of a club model, something where those students are able to be engaged throughout the year if necessary. So we do have some sort of creative solutions planned for those issues. Okay, so the daily schedule, this is Monday through Thursday. For students on the independent study model, of course, they'd be at home working. For students on the full-time and the hybrid model, from 8:30 to noon, they are in class, that one class. Let's say it's first period. So mornings begin with a wellness check-in. There's sort of advisory type stuff going on. There might be some discussion. The teachers are checking in, making sure that students are engaged and ready to go. And then they would start their class, and that direct instruction would last for about 3 hours. Then at noon, students on the hybrid model are going to grab their lunch and head home. Students on the full-time model are going to grab their lunch and head back to class. And we need to do a little bit more planning and talking about what lunch looks like. But that, as of now, is the vision. And then finally, from 1 to 3, students on the hybrid model are going to be working on a couple of hours of extended learning independently at home. And then students on the full-time model are going to be working on that same extended learning independently, but they're in a study period with teacher supervision. So students on the full-time model are able to stay on campus until 3. Students on the hybrid, if that works well for them, they can head home and do some work independently. And then Fridays are a little bit different. They would be an early out day. So excuse me, I have the wrong times on here. This model has shifted quite a bit. So on Fridays from 8:30 to noon, students in the full-time and hybrid model are attending class. Mornings begin with that wellness check-in as usual. And then at lunch, everyone heads home. And at 1 o'clock, students are going to attend Zoom advisory from home. So in this model, as you can see, there's no advisory during the day. And our rationale for that is that we want to reduce contacts as much as possible. So Fridays would allow students to continue to check in with their advisories and at least get that weekly engagement with those advisory communities. So an example day, a typical day, let's say the student is in English 10. I'm so sorry, I have the wrong times on here as well. From 8:30 to noon, let's say a student is attending English 10 with Mrs. Kaufman. And again, the class begins with some wellness check-in, maybe a discussion of roses and thorns, what's going well for you, what's not. And then we launch into the class in that direct instruction for about 3 hours. So they might do a quick write Kaufman might do a mini lecture. They might read an article connected to a lit text, writing response. They might do a guided discussion, group work on a project, and then she might review the online learning expectations for the afternoon. So our teachers are master teachers, and they understand that you're not lecturing for 3 hours. You're going to mix it up with some inquiry, with some exploration, with some peer discussion. And to my mind, and we've talked a lot as a staff about the need to get up and be active after, and not to sit for too long. So we'll be talking about how to provide some, what do we call those, Danielle?
Breaks.
Brain breaks, yeah. So again, at lunch, students head home on the hybrid model, full-time model. They grab their lunches and they go back to class. And then students on the hybrid would be working independently at home, maybe completing an assigned reading for their lit book, viewing a video, writing a comparison response. A student on the full-time model would be doing those same extended learning assignments, but in a study period with a teacher. Should I stop for a minute, Ken?
No, I think if you keep going, I think a lot of the questions are getting answered or will be answered.
Okay, perfect. So one really tremendous benefit with this model is that it allows us to create smaller class sizes. And the way that this works, teachers will not have a prep period because their prep time will be in the afternoon and then on Friday afternoons as well. So for example, a math teacher with 2 Math 2 courses, some prep, some study hall, a Math C, a Intro to Engineering, that would allow us to build in more classes here. So this teacher would have 3 Math 2 classes instead of 2, 2 Math C classes instead of 1, 2 IED classes instead of 1. So this allows us to really spread out the number of students in each class, and we intend to have no more than 20 students in each class, and we anticipate that that number will actually be smaller. So definitely pros and cons to consider with this model. So some of the pros, minimal contact with peers and teachers, and this is a huge priority for us. We want to make sure that our teachers are safe, that our students are safe, and that we are able to stay on campus. We want to minimize the possibility of spread. And then minimal mass movement between classes because students are in that one class for the whole day. Again, if someone gets sick, there's the potential for a cohort quarantine or a smaller group quarantine versus a difficulty with contact tracing and the possibility of a whole school shutdown. Students receive that in-person instruction every day. Daily interaction with teachers increases accountability, it increases engagement. And we like the greater flexibility. That time in the afternoon when students are working independently, that's a time when teachers, counselors, other specialists can provide that one-on-one student support in the afternoons, either virtually or in person. Lower class sizes allows for that 6 feet of space between students, ideally, that we know is necessary. The consistent schedule we like is more convenient for families. So depending on your choice of model, well, regardless of your choice of model, your schedule is going to be consistent. And then finally, the ability for parents to choose the model that works for their student. So considering the need for safety, considering how well your student works independently, considering how desperately your student wants to be back on campus, you can choose the model that works for your family. So we like that flexibility. And there are certainly cons. The jury is sort of out on issues with learning retention. We don't know how much that gap between classes is going to make it difficult for students entering classes the next year. And it'll be really important for us to do a lot of review especially in classes that need that daily practice like math, languages, music classes, etc. In this model, there are fewer instructional minutes, about 1,000 fewer instructional minutes per class. And we know Inspire is known for its college prep and rigorous programs. And so that presents a challenge for teachers. They're going to have to really understand and work in departments to know like what is essential to teach students in that time. As we mentioned, AP exam prep presents some challenges, we can be creative there and figure out how to meet those challenges. There would be challenges for students leaving Inspire. We do have a few students who leave every year. And so it makes it a little bit difficult for those students to catch up on credits. Students wouldn't have that daily balance of academics and electives. And so if a student is in a class that they don't particularly like, they don't get that kind of mix. The pro of that is maybe they knock it out quickly and then it's done. And really there's just a lack of research on this model for high school students. So we are going into something with safety uppermost in our minds. And really there's some uncertainty about the learning pieces, the content pieces. So it's important for parents to know that when you're making a choice of the model for your student. So that's kind of the big overview. I know some parents might have questions about if we do end up having to, if the situation changes, how flexible or how ready would we be to meet that change? And I just want to talk a little bit about, if the situation does get worse and we need to go to that distance learning model again, we would stick with the 1-by-8 schedule. And teachers have been doing some planning and thinking, and we've been doing that as a staff on how we're going to improve distance learning. So we're happy to share those plans with you. For individual students, this model makes it very easy to toggle back and forth. Let's say that you started out with independent study, but our community situation improved and you were feeling as a family like you wanted to send your child back to school. It would be very easy once you finished that class period to then go into an on-campus learning. So that makes it easy for families to sort of flex in and out of the different models. And then the difference between a hybrid or full-time model, that would be very easy to fix for you. So that is another benefit that I see.
So that question came up a couple of times about
Okay.
going in and out of the different models. And I just wanted to say that the Edgenuity program allows for that. So for instance, our classes will go 4.2 weeks. The Edgenuity class, which by the way, I sent everybody the link to edgenuity.com in the chat box, but the Edgenuity class would last 4.2 weeks as well. So it'd be a pretty seamless jump in and out.
Thanks, Ken. So I wanted to give, I think we have a couple of I'm going to stop my sharing for just a minute here. And I wanted to give some teachers a chance to comment on this model and just to share their thoughts with you. And if I can unmute Danielle. Danielle, do you mind?
No, I don't. Hi, everybody. I want to first start off by saying that I have had a lot of thoughts about this, and I've talked to a couple other teachers this week and today about speaking with you all, and there's no way I'm going to remember every little detail because it's just weird speaking to you all. So I apologize, and I hope I can kind of give you a flyover view from the teacher perspective and speak for my colleagues. So just to put it out there, I think everybody's really nervous to go back to work and to go back to school. And there's, but I will say that, and I'm one of the teachers with a health condition, and there's been a lot of fear in my family about exposure just in general. But when I learned about the 1x8 model, and then later on learned that we wouldn't be having advisory in person. So basically as a teacher, I am only going to have this small cohort for 4.2 weeks. And if that made me feel much, much safer. And it gave me a lot of hope for actually going back in person. I will also say that if we were to go to distance learning on this model, I also feel very empowered by this model as a teacher, mainly because it would be a smaller cohort of students that I would get to really interact with and engage with you as a family and my students for those 4.2 weeks if it was online or distance learning. It was very difficult last semester to manage all my classes, all my students, try and catch the kids that were falling behind. So with this model, if it switches to distance learning, I feel a lot more confident about that. I also want to mention that I think all of us as staff members feel very empowered by the administration, and we have been reached out to as part-timers, as staff members with health conditions, as staff members that are just nervous about everything. Becky and Ken and Matt and everybody has done a really good job about with communicating with us and asking for our feedback. And because of all these things, yes, I am nervous, and I understand that there's a certain amount of risk, but because of the smaller class sizes, because of the smaller number of contacts in those weeks and the requirement of masks, I'm feeling actually pretty positive about this. So the heart palpitations started going down a little bit when I read this model. And I think that's kind of the flyover that I wanted to give. If Jim is still on, I would love him to give the perspective of a teacher, because I, as a math teacher, I'm actually, the idea of 4.2 weeks deep dive with my students sounds thrilling, because I don't teach memorization. It's not about that. It's about really thinking and having conversations, and we can do that in 3 hours. But I know that Jim might have a different perspective as a music teacher. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I really appreciate it. And Jim, I'm going to unmute you. Oops. There we go.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
You're good.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, I don't have a video on, folks. I'm in a place not at home, so I don't have as good of a network. It won't pick up my videos as cleanly. So a couple things just I want to add to. One of them, there is a variety of responses from teachers, and I have to be honest to say I'm one that's not particularly fearful. So there is a mixture. The important thing to remember here is what Danielle said. We all feel very supported by our admin. They have asked questions, they provided resources, they're making whatever we need available to help this work for a variety of students in a variety of situations that none of us ever done before. As a teacher, we all want to be back in the class with our students. I mean, it's like, these are our kids too. So we want to be a part of that very quickly. However, we want to be smart, and we think all these things have been put in place well. So a couple things to think about. I actually completed my Master's of Education in Instructional Technology with this block schedule. It wasn't high school, obviously. It was a graduate degree, but it works. It is a deep dive. It is one of those things where you spend a lot of time on a specific subject and you come away with a deeper understanding in a shorter amount of time. Some of the areas that I struggle with, obviously in music, there are some things that have to ruminate. You have to live with your skill set and practice and play again, and that just can't be done in a month. So there's a lot to be said with that. So that has a little bit of concern. But then at the same time, I flip it into the band camp. I've spent many summers in some kind of a band camp. 2 weeks of band, you come away with some skills that you never get in a semester of band in high school, or orchestra in high school, or pop band, or whatever the case may be. So I think the opportunity for some real deep dive and some intensive study is there. Like was mentioned earlier in one of the cons, we don't know what the longevity is going to be. How well equipped are they going to be for next year? We just don't know. We haven't done this before. So I'm going in, yeah, there's a little bit of anxiety because I don't know how each one of my classes is going to work. I like the smaller classes, but orchestra has always been a big class. I want a big orchestra, not just a little one. So trying to figure those pieces out is just going to be a challenge, and we're going to make some mistakes, and we're going to have some great success in the middle of it too. So I think that those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think we can open it. Let me just share again really quickly my screen just so you could see the next steps. So we are going to need all parents to fill out this school model choice form. This is just a very, very quick form. You're just indicating, you're giving us your child's name, whether you're returning to Inspire, and then very quickly you're choosing the hybrid model or the full-time model or the independent study model. And we need that as soon as possible so we can start putting our plans together. So I'm hoping by next Friday, everybody can do that. It'll take you 3 minutes. And of course, you'll want to have a conversation with your family and your student to decide what's best for you. But if you could fill out those forms as soon as possible. And I'm actually going to share a link, if I can, to that form in the chat. So you could grab onto it now, or I will also send it. Excuse me, everyone, in my newsletter tomorrow. So you'll see that in the chat now. And I want to open it up at this point. I'm going to make Ken the host, and he's going to moderate, and we'll take a little bit of time. We can't answer every question, but maybe the questions that you're seeing repeated, Ken.
Yeah, and folks, if we didn't get your question in the chat, feel free to ask the question here. I'm going to unmute Ty O'Neill. You should be unmuted.
Did I raise my hand? I'm sorry.
You got your hand right up.
I have that was accidental. You can move on to the next one.
No problem. Okay.
And huge thanks to Ty. I mean, he was one of the parents that were so helpful in putting these plans together. I see Joni right in front of me, and so grateful to her and so many parents who were integral to helping this plan evolve. So parents, if you have questions, maybe just raise a hand and we'll unmute you.
And there's a question about if the school ends up closing and students are all distance learning, will the students on the 1x8 model be taught via Zoom, Google Classrooms by Inspire teachers, or would they transition to Edgenuity?
Yes.
And yeah, so yes, they will be taught by our teachers. My story to the staff the other day was that when we went from regular model back in March to the all of a sudden we're in distance learning, we asked our teachers to do something like they were playing cello first chair for the New York Symphony, and then the next day they were playing center field for the New York Mets. You know, it was a tough transition. We weren't prepared. There are online teachers, and then there are in-person teachers, and Edgenuity provides us a really strong platform. It's filled with engaging lessons, things that our teachers can explore and add to and take away from and make it their own. So we're excited about the Edgenuity option, and I encourage you all to check that website out. I'm going to unmute the Narita family.
Hi, everybody. We just wanted to know, how will electives such as dance and performance art related type electives be handled?
Yeah, so there are several classes for which this model is not ideal. And it's interesting because in talking to performing arts teachers. Jim is really representative of those teachers. They are amazing. They're creative. There are pieces of this they don't love, and pieces of it they do love. I think for those elective classes, there are going to need to be a lot of club opportunities, so ways that students can continue to engage in the things that they're really there to set inspire. I would encourage you to maybe reach out to those teachers as well and hear their ideas for how they're going to run their classes. Several of them are excited about the opportunity for a deep dive into that particular discipline. I think Kimberly Humble can have.
Michelle Niven. Michelle?
Hi, yes, I was curious how are classes such as, or how our TA periods, peer tutors, and kids who are going to have an open period, how are those going to be handled?
So the open periods study halls are going to be difficult. We won't be able to offer study hall or an open period because that would be a 4.2 week vacation. But for TAs, we have several classes where, and we're kind of working one-on-one to engage those TAs, but where teachers are saying, please don't take my TAs. I really would love to have this student in my class, because at Inspire, in a lot of the classes, the TAs are really like the mentors, the older students who mentor the younger students. So a lot of those pieces will still be in place, just not study hall or open period.
There's a question about the ventilation systems. It's one of the things I didn't talk about during my safety plan briefing. I just want to say that we've purchased the highest rated filters that we can for our systems. The doors and windows will be open during the day as long as we can stand it, before it gets too cold. And there's a question about redirecting the air. I'm not sure about redirecting the air, but we are going to ask that our HVAC service representatives adjust the airflow so that the mix of air includes more of the outside air than inside air, and that's something that I'm actually working on tomorrow. So, and I think we have the Norita family again. Let me see. No?
I think Kimberly Humble, Ken, has had her hand up.
There you go, Kimberly.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I should probably wear glasses, so it's gonna look funny. I'm gonna have to pull the screen up to my face to read my question out loud. But, so what would constitute an exposure, and what does quarantine look like following exposure? So I'm talking about, like, a classroom of 20 students and a teacher, and one child says, like, ends up with, let's say, cold or flu symptoms that can mirror COVID-19 symptoms. So there's going to be illnesses that happen, and kids are going to be homesick.
Mm-hmm.
How do we decide that it's a COVID situation? Is everybody going to be required to be tested? And if they're required to be tested, but they aren't, if they're required to be tested, but we don't know if it's just a cold, then aren't the students all just sitting there together for 2 weeks, potentially waiting for them to get their results? So by then our quarantine period is up already. So I don't know how that's going to play out.
So what I want to do, Kimberly, what I want to do is wait until we have those materials from Butte County Public Health, and they're working on a draft. We were told that they'd be done today, but it should be any day now. And they really outline, like, here's what the school does. here's what Butte County Public Health does. Here's what families do. And I think that's going to give you like a much more crystal clear understanding of what would happen in that scenario. So I think it'll help us to all, it might relieve anxiety a little bit for us all to know exactly what would happen. So if it's okay, I will send those to you as the minute I have them.
Yeah, that would be great. And then I had one other question. Mainly my daughter has this question. So Kylie-Ann was wondering that if she's in, if we were, let's say we went with the full day model. So 3 hours of, classroom instruction and then the extended learning portion of it in the classroom. Is there flexibility within that second half of the day so that if she's completely caught up, she can leave early?
Oh, that's a great question. I would tend to say that we would need a parent phone call or a note, just like, if you were going to pick your kid up from school.
Okay.
I don't think we don't want kids coming and going. So we'd need, a parent permission for that to happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. So I want to give it maybe about 5 more minutes. I know there are so many questions. What I'll try to do is to put together an FAQ and send that out as well. If I'm seeing questions if I'm seeing some themes. So parents who filled out that question form, some of the major questions there were, why are masks not required? Hopefully we've answered those questions tonight. There was another question about why aren't teachers focusing on distance learning, because that will likely happen again. And as I said, my message to teachers over this summer was please focus on planning for distance learning because it's likely to happen. And as a staff, again, we have talked about a solid plan for improving distance learning. So those were kind of the 2 big pieces that emerged on that question form. So maybe 1 or 2 more, Ken, before we go.
Yeah, Roylene has a question.
My friend, or my son's friend, and my son both ride the bus to Inspire. And so on Friday, when they get out at noon, they're going to have to find something to do until they can get a ride home. But their advisory's at 1, and they wouldn't have access to a home computer. Mm-hmm. So is that advisory absolutely required?
No. So no. And also we've talked about the possibility of a few students maybe being able to stay on campus if they needed to do that for advisory. And we have so many teachers that they wouldn't mind at all if that happened. So I think those are those case by case situations that we can totally problem solve for. But at this point, I don't think we're going to make advisory mandatory. I'll have to talk to teachers about that, Eileen.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see any more hands.
And Kathy Brazil asked, is the decision to reopen in the middle of this pandemic based largely on financial reasons? And the answer is no, our funding does not change. Whether we're doing distance learning or whether we're on campus, our funding doesn't change. Okay.
The Narita family.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to make sure that you guys saw my chat posts, that we appreciate all of the hard work, all the headache, all the whirlwind of information that you guys have gone through to try to put all of this together over the summer. And I know it's a hot topic, but I do want you guys to know that I know I speak for more than myself and that it is very much appreciated.
Ellen, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That is very kind, and your words are much appreciated, as is your service to our school. You're amazing. So thank you to all families for your patience, your kindness, and your partnership. We so appreciate you, and we wouldn't have this plan without you. So please do continue to reach out with concerns, with questions to help us get better in what we do and to help us serve your students. Don't forget to fill out that form. Again, I'll send a link. There's a link in the chat, but I'll send it out again tomorrow in my newsletter. And I'm going to sign off from here. Thank you, everyone. So appreciate you.